What if I told you that the driver who built Red Bull into an unstoppable dynasty might now be the very thing holding them back? This video breaks down how Max Verstappen's constant criticism and refusal to adapt are turning his worst season since 2018 into a nightmare for the entire team. You'll discover the hitting technical flaws in the RB22 that even Verstappen can't control, and why his aggressive driving style is actually making everything worse. But the real question is, can he change his approach before his contract clause lets him walk away? Or is this the beginning of the end for F1's most dominant duo? Max Verstappen has dominated Formula One for years. We're talking about a four-time world champion who has rewritten the record books and set standards that seemed untouchable. But this 2026 season has become something nobody expected, a complete reversal of fortune that's forced everyone, including the driver himself, to confront some uncomfortable realities. And here's where it gets interesting. While the car problems are absolutely real, there's another factor that might be holding him back just as much, if not more. It's something that even the legends of motorsport are now publicly calling out. Let's start with the numbers, because they tell a story that Verstappen hasn't experienced in nearly a decade. At the summer break, he's sitting 6th in the driver's standings with 109 points across the first 11 races. Think about that for a second. That's his lowest position at the summer break since 2018. 8 years ago. Back then, he had 105 points, so he's actually marginally ahead in points compared to his worst season, but the current timeline makes this thing even more. The context is completely different now. Verstappen is supposed to be at his peak. He's supposed to be dominating, yet here we are. But the statistics get even more telling when you look at what happened before the summer break. Verstappen didn't win a single Grand Prix, not one. That hasn't happened since 2017, and even then, it took him until round 15 out of 20 races to finally reach that first victory. This year, he managed 4 podiums, with his best finishes being second place at Austria and Hungary. For someone who has spent recent seasons making winning look routine, 4th place finishes feel almost offensive to watch. The frustration hasn't been hidden. Verstappen has made his feelings abundantly clear about the Red Bull RB22, regularly describing it as undrivable. These aren't casual complaints either. These are intense, public statements that carry weight when they come from a driver of his caliber. He's even gone further, threatening to retire from Formula One entirely after 2026 if the regulations don't change. His distaste for the increased emphasis on battery management and electric power in the engine formula has become one of the most prominent storylines of his season, and frankly, his passion about this issue is unmistakable. Here's what's interesting though. Verstappen hasn't been the only one complaining about the 2026 regulations, but he's certainly been the loudest, the most consistent, and the most outspoken. Initially, many observers dismissed his concerns, thinking he was just making excuses. But as the season progressed and more races happened, more people within the paddock started agreeing with him. The regulations genuinely do create certain issues. At the Hungarian Grand Prix, Verstappen explained his position with genuine frustration. In the beginning, most people were saying, "Oh, he's complaining, he should shut up." But I have to say that the last few races, more and more people are seeing the same thing that I could see coming a long time ago. And he's not wrong. The complaints have validity. The regulations are restricting driver talent in ways that previous generations didn't experience. The complexity added by the battery management and the power unit regulations has neutralized lap time differentials in a way that allows teams that are technically inferior to still perform competitively. You see it in the tight battles between teams and even between teammates. Sometimes a driver simply cannot make the difference they're capable of making, because attempting to do so will create penalties elsewhere on the circuit. It's a frustrating system that limits what Verstappen does best, exploiting his superior skill to devastating effect. However, and this is where the narrative takes an unexpected turn, there's a growing belief in insiders and experts that Verstappen's constant public criticism and his emotional response to these challenges might actually be making his situation worse, not better. Enter Tom Kristensen. The name might not immediately ring bells for everyone, but in motorsport circles, Kristensen is an absolute legend. 9-time Le Mans winner, one of the greatest endurance racing drivers who ever lived. This isn't just someone with opinions. This is someone who has navigated incredibly complex machinery under extreme pressure and adapted to dramatically changing technical regulations throughout his career. Recently, he shared some thoughts that directly speak to Verstappen's current situation, and they're worth examining. Kristensen told Motorsport media that drivers need to possess a good mental state to perform at their highest level in modern racing. That's not some vague motivational quote. It's a specific observation been rooted in decades of racing at the absolute highest level. He explains his reasoning: the task hasn't changed. You have to be the first to cross the finish line, and to do that, you have to be able to overtake. As a modern racing driver, you have to be able to adapt to the conditions. We did that years before in endurance racing when we introduced hybrid race cars. To master these systems, Kristensen continued, you need the ability to get the best out of everything, not just the car, but also your talent. I think it's wrong to argue that in a perfect world there would only be gas, brake, and steering wheel. That's not how it works today. Things are simply a bit more complex than they used to be, and now it's crucial that a driver can adapt to that. If you can't, you're finished. That last line hits differently, doesn't it? This is someone with legitimacy saying that adaptation is non-negotiable, and then he added something that feels directly aimed at what's happening with Verstappen. I'm convinced that if you're in a good mental state, you automatically drive better, including in terms of energy management. With these cars, you need the steady foot of a driver who firmly believes in himself, and with high self-confidence, you can handle pressure better and drive better. When you actually hear these words from a legend like Kristensen, you start to wonder whether Verstappen's constant negativity about the regulations and the car, while understandable, might actually be working against him psychologically. It's difficult to maintain that kind of unwavering self-confidence and belief in yourself when you're simultaneously telling everyone around you and yourself that the situation is essentially broken and nearly impossible. This brings us to another dimension of the story that adds yet another layer of complexity. According to various reports, Red Bull's engineers and leadership privately believe that Verstappen might actually be driving too aggressively for what the RB22 is capable of delivering. This isn't a statement about his skill, it's about his approach given the specific constraints of this particular car. The evidence is there in the accidents he's had this season. At the Austrian Grand Prix, he crashed. At Silverstone, he crashed during the race. These aren't the kinds of mistakes you typically associate with Verstappen, who is renowned for his racecraft and his ability to push the absolute limit without falling over the edge. But both incidents appear to stem from the same fundamental issue. He was braking later, turning in harder, and demanding performance from the car that it simply couldn't deliver in those exact moments. The Silverstone incident is particularly telling. At the high-speed Stowe corner, Verstappen was braking significantly later than his teammate Isaac Hadar. This meant that when he turned in, his rear wing didn't have enough time to close and reattach its downforce. The car simply lost grip because it physically wasn't in the configuration needed to provide what Verstappen was demanding from it. The same thing happened at the Austrian Grand Prix's demanding Turn 9. His rear wing hadn't reverted to its closed position after using straight mode, and when he turned in, the lack of downforce caused the rear end to lose traction. This is mechanics and physics, but it's also revealing of an approach, and Hungary, perhaps the most telling incident of all, saw Verstappen spin out during qualifying and then declare the car completely broken. But here's what Red Bull's investigation apparently showed. The car wasn't completely broken. What was happening was that aerodynamic degradation was causing the car to lose downforce over the course of a lap. This is a real problem with the car, but it's also something that drivers must learn to manage and adapt to throughout their stint. Verstappen, in his frustration, was pushing for maximum performance on every single lap, which doesn't work when you're dealing with a package that has characteristics that change throughout the session. The complication Red Bull faces is that they need to fix the aero degradation issue, but fixing it would create other issues affecting overall performance. Verstappen, meanwhile, is pushing the car to its limits in frustration, which creates a vicious cycle. He gets frustrated by the car's behavior, so he pushes harder, which causes crashes, which damages the car and his results, which increases his frustration. There's a pattern emerging here that transcends the technical specifications of the car. It's about how Verstappen is responding to adversity compared to how he's responded in previous seasons. Throughout his career, even in difficult moments, Verstappen has possessed a kind of mental resilience and focus that allowed him to extract everything from whatever machinery was available. That seems to have shifted this year. The constant public complaints, while having legitimate technical backing, have perhaps created a negative feedback loop that's affecting his performance and his mental approach to each race. Here's what's particularly significant. Verstappen is facing his first major adversity since he joined Red Bull in a position to consistently win championships. His entire Red Bull era has been defined by dominance. When regulations changed in 2021 and 2022, he adapted and continued winning. But this year, for the first time, he's expected to finish a season outside the top positions, and the adjustment to that reality seems to be proving mentally difficult. That's not a weakness, it's human, but recognizing it is important. The counter-argument to all of this, of course, is that Verstappen is genuinely complaining about genuine problems. The regulations are restrictive. The car does have issues. His concerns aren't baseless. But here's the distinction that matters. Having legitimate concerns and allowing those concerns to define your mental state and approach are two different things. Kristensen's point about mental state isn't dismissing the technical reality. It's saying that regardless of the technical reality, your mental approach determines whether you'll extract maximum performance or not. Think about it from a different angle. Consider other drivers who have faced technical disadvantages throughout their careers. Some have responded by getting increasingly frustrated, blaming the equipment, and seeing their performance decline further. Others have accepted the constraints, focused on what they can control, and often surprised people with what they've managed to achieve in suboptimal machinery. The difference isn't usually the car, it's the mental framework. For Verstappen, the path forward after the summer break might actually require him to fundamentally shift his approach, not by pretending the car is better than it is, but by channeling his frustrations into focused problem-solving rather than public complaints. It's a subtle but profound difference. Instead of telling the media how broken the car is, he could be working intensively with his engineering team on how to extract the absolute maximum from what they have. Instead of threatening retirement from Formula One, he could be focusing on the challenge of adapting to these regulations, the way Kristensen did with hybrid technology. The technical problems are real, but Red Bull can't fix them if Verstappen is so frustrated that he's crashing the car and pushing harder than the machinery can handle. And Verstappen won't perform at his peak if his mental energy is consumed by anger about the regulations rather than laser-focused concentration on the race at hand. This might sound like a subtle psychological observation, but in a sport where margins are measured in hundreds of seconds, psychology is absolutely fundamental to performance. What makes this situation compelling is that it's not just about Verstappen anymore. It's become a case study in how even the greatest talents respond to adversity. The Red Bull organization is working on technical solutions. The engineers are trying to balance multiple competing objectives. But ultimately, if Verstappen returns from the summer break with a fundamentally different mental approach, one where he accepts the constraints of the current regulations and focuses entirely on optimizing within those constraints, there could be a significant shift in his results. He doesn't need to suddenly love the 2026 regulations. He doesn't need to become someone who's genuinely happy about the direction F1 has taken. But he does need to make peace with it enough that it's not the constant background noise of his psychology. He needs to channel his competitiveness into solving problems rather than complaining about them. He needs to drive with precision and intelligence rather than raw aggression that the car can't handle. The remaining seasons of his career, because make no mistake, he will almost certainly continue racing long after 2026, depend on whether he can make this mental adjustment. It's not about talent. It's not about being less skilled than he was. It's about whether he can evolve his approach to match the current reality of the sport he chose to dominate. He needs to accept the car's limitations and drive within them. That means braking earlier. That means not pushing beyond the aerodynamics. That means settling for P5 or P6 instead of crashing out trying for P1. It's not glorious. It's not what champions do, but it's what this champion needs to do right now. And most importantly, he needs to fix his mental state. He needs to find a way to enjoy racing again. He needs to remember why he started doing this in the first place. He needs to stop being emotionally empty and start being present. Because the best version of Max Verstappen isn't the one who complains about everything. It's the one who finds a way to win no matter what. Kristensen said it best. With these cars, you need the steady foot of a driver who firmly believes in himself, and with high self-confidence, you can handle pressure better and drive better. Verstappen believes in himself. That's never been the question. The question is whether he believes in the process, whether he believes in the team, whether he believes he can adapt. Because if he can't adapt, he's finished. Not just at Red Bull, in Formula One. The sport moves on. New regulations come and go. New challenges emerge. The drivers who survive are the ones who evolve. The ones who refuse to evolve get left behind. Look at Lewis Hamilton. Look at Fernando Alonso. These are drivers who adapted to multiple regulation changes, who reinvented themselves, who found ways to win in different cars, different eras, different circumstances. That's what greatness looks like. Not dominance in a single era, longevity across many eras. Verstappen has the talent to be one of the greats. He already is one of the greats. But greatness isn't static. It's dynamic. It requires growth. It requires change. And right now, Verstappen isn't growing. He's stagnating. He's stuck in 2023 trying to drive a 2026 car like it's 2023, and it's not working. So here's the question that will define the rest of his career. Can he change? Can he look in the mirror and admit that he's part of the problem? Can he dial back the aggression and focus on survival? Can he stop complaining and start leading? Can he find a way to be happy again? Because if he can't, this isn't just a bad season. This is the beginning of the end. And that would be a tragedy, not just for Red Bull, not just for F1 fans, but for the sport itself. Because we're watching one of the greatest drivers of all time self-destruct, and it's painful to see. The summer break is over. The second half of the season is about to begin. Verstappen has a choice to make. He can keep doing what he's doing, complaining, pushing too hard, crashing out, blaming everyone except himself, or he can change. He can adapt. He can accept that this season is lost and start building for the future. The choice is his, but the clock is ticking, and F1 waits for no one.